Alright, so today we are going to be adding a new partition to our fresh install of Arch Linux. So if you have your users and everything added, that is all fine. The most important thing is that we start with your single partitioned Arch Linux box. Alright, so enter to go into Arch Linux, yada yada yada. Alright, so here we are going to want to log in as our root, enter the password, and so the first thing that we need to do is we need to install some of the old install scripts that we had from before, but they didn't get copied into the new system because generally you don't need them. But for the work that we're doing, we do need them today. So we're going to do pacman -s -- needed so it doesn't install unnecessary scripts, and then we have the arch install scripts. Hit Y. Should just take a second. Alright, great. So now we have all the scripts we need installed. We can clear that. And so the first thing we are going to do is we're going to repartition our disk. So we're going to open up CF disk. We have our old partition table here. We just need to make some changes. We're going to make this main partition not bootable. And we're going to create a new partition. So this one only needs to be about half a gigabyte because it's only going to hold our grub configuration files and our init RAM and a couple other files to start up the Linux kernel. We want it to be primary, and we are going to make it bootable. And so that's about it. From here, we can write it to our disk and quit. Alright, cool. So now we have our partition set up. We need to put a file system on it. And because it's going to be our boot partition, we don't need journaling, so we can just use ext2 instead of ext4. So as we can see up here, it's called /dev/sda2, or if you want to double check, you can always do lsblk. And there it is, sda2. So we're going to do it mkfs.ext2 on our /dev/sda2. Wonderful. Alright, cool. So now we have our file system on the partition. We're ready to move our boot files from our boot folder into our new partition. The one thing we need to do before we can actually access it through our shell right now is we need to mount it. So we're going to mount our /dev/sda2 into our mounting folder, mnt. And then now we can look at our boot folder, and we want to move all of these files into our new partition. So we're going to do move/boot/star to grab all of those and put those into /mnt. Should take a second. Now if we look at our boot folder, there's nothing, and if we look at mnt, it's got all the files we need. So the only problem is all these files are now in the mnt folder, but we actually want them to be in the boot folder. But the boot folder we currently have is linked to the original partition, so we need to unmount this partition and then mount it into the boot folder so that our boot folder is properly linked up into the partition that we just created. So we're going to umount our /mnt, and then we're going to mount /dev/sda2 onto our boot folder. And then do lsblk to see that it's mounted on the boot folder, and we can also do ls onto our boot folder and see that it has all the files that we just made. So now that we have all our partitions properly mounted, the right file is in there, we can generate our fstab. So that way the computer will know to mount the boot folder, or mount sda2 into the boot folder and use it as such when we start up our computer. So we do gen fstab, we give it the root, which is our current root, and then a single arrow because we want to overwrite the previous fstab. And we're going to put it in our /etc/fstab, like so. Looks like it worked, and we can just open that up to double check, see that it looks right. And we got in here our /dev/sda1. It is at our root, ext4, perfect. We got our trace sf. That should be fine as it is. And then we have our boot here in our boot folder, ext2, with our read and write privileges. Also very important. Alright, so we can just quit that. And now that we have our fstab and everything, we just need to tell grub that we are dealing with a new system. So we're going to do a grub install back onto SDA, just so that it can properly do what it needs to do. And then all we need to do after that is create a config file for grub. So we're going to do grub -mkconfig -o, and then we want to put that into our /boot/grub folder, and then our grub config file. So just take a second. Alright, cool, and it's done. So if we did everything correctly, we have our file mounted to the boot partition, we have all of our boot folders in there, we generated our new fstab, we should be able to reboot and everything works fine. So let's try that right now. Reboot now. Alright, so far so good. Alright, and if we can log in, then we can confidently say everything worked out fine. LSBLK, and we see everything is properly mounted, so there you go. That's how you can partition your hard drive and add new partitions for new folders. Alright, so we just walked through how to create your boot partition, and now for your own homework I want you to research and look up how to create your own home and swap partitions. So remember, the swap partition doesn't need to be mounted, it just needs to be created as a swap point. So you'll know you did this correctly if it says swap here under mount point. I just use the rest of the disk because you can only have 4 partitions. So we're going to have a home, which is for your general like user files, swap, which is for your swap, and then your root partition has all of the kernel space programs and such. So when you start up, you should have it all mounted, and then if you look at your fstab, it should have both these new partitions as well. The, once again, swap file is not mounted to anything, it is a special swap partition. Alright.